Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're moving past just talking about inclusive education, the idea of it.
Right.
We're getting straight into what it actually takes, the systemic blueprints needed to make it real.
Yeah, and we've got quite a mix of sources here. National policy frameworks like this 10-theme one from Malta, and also academic research on, well, on what works in the classroom.
So as I mentioned today.
It's really to pull out the practical stuff, the concrete steps, yes, but also the big mindset shifts needed.
Okay.
How do we actually build schools that are truly equitable, that really push all students to achieve? If you're involved in education at any level, this is basically the transformation map.
Before we jump into the how, let's just nail down the definition we're using. We say IE is a fundamental right, but what does that mean for a student, practically speaking?
Well, fundamentally, IE is seen as a continuous process. It's not a static thing, not a one-off program.
Right.
Ongoing. Exactly. And crucially, it means students with disabilities or, other disadvantages are learning right alongside their peers.
In mainstream classrooms.
Yes, in mainstream classrooms for most of the school day. The core idea is adapting the education system to fit the learner's needs.
Not forcing the learner to fit the system.
Precisely. That's the absolute foundational mindset shift we need.
Okay, and adapting the system means understanding who we're adapting for. The diversity aspect's pretty broad, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Much broader than often assumed. The sources are clear. We're talking disability, yes, but also ethnicity, gender, age, national origin, sexual orientation, social class, different cultures. The list goes on.
Wow.
And the end goal isn't just ticking boxes for accessibility. It's about high-quality education for all, preparing them for their future, high expectations for everyone.
Okay, so let's unpack that blueprint then. This National Inclusive Education Framework, it's built around 10 themes. Sounds comprehensive.
It is 10 interconnected themes. It's designed as a roadmap, really. Maybe we can focus on,
Yeah.
say, 5 key ones that show how it all links together.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Well, the framework makes it clear. Inclusion has to be a whole school thing, not just one department's job.
Right.
And the first theme really drives that home. Inclusive and strategic leadership.
So, from the top down.
Absolutely. Leaders need to set really clear, ambitious goals for inclusion. They need to model it, live those values,
Yeah.
and crucially, make sure every educator feels responsible for all learners.
Not just the specialists.
Exactly. If the leadership isn't fully bought in, the whole thing starts to fray.
I can see how that leads directly into the second theme you mentioned,
Right.
the whole school inclusive environment.
Precisely. The environment has to mirror that leadership commitment. So focusing on accessibility in all its forms, physical, sure, but also curricular, social,
Yeah.
removing barriers,
And universal design for learning, UDL, comes in here.
big time. But think about how that connects systemically. You've got leadership setting the vision, the environment needing to reflect it. But then you hit theme 4, continuous professional development, or CPD.
Ah, the training piece. If leaders expect more, teachers need the tools.
Exactly. And the research is really clear on what kind of CPD works for inclusion. It has to be ongoing, not a one-off workshop.
Right.
It needs to be collaborative and targeted to help all teachers, especially the main class teachers, respond effectively to diversity, not just training for the specialists.
Because if the CPD isn't there or isn't effective.
Then inclusion stays an idea, not something that actually happens in the classroom day to day.
Okay, that links neatly to planning and support. Theme 3 is individual education plans, IEPs. How do they need to change in this model?
The whole IEP process, the planning, the doing, the checking, it has to genuinely involve everyone.
Everyone.
The student, parents, teachers, any outside professionals, all working together. And the goals set in that IEP, they need to be challenging, aiming for real skill development and independence, not just managing the student.
Makes sense. And the last one of the 5, support structures, Theme 5. This sounds like where funding often becomes the sticking point.
It often is. But the shift required in support structures and services is huge. It's about changing the focus,
How so?
moving towards prevention, proper screening, early intervention, getting ahead of issues.
Instead of
Waiting for problems to become really big and then trying to fix the learner with compensatory programs, that's reactive, often less effective, and frankly more expensive in the long run.
So proactive investment, that sounds like a key indicator of a truly inclusive system.
Definitely.
That leadership piece, Theme 1, you said it's the linchpin. The source material mentioned, ahead of school, Mr. Sala, his experience seemed quite telling. It wasn't just smooth sailing, was it?
No, and that's a great example of leadership in action. He didn't just announce, we're doing inclusion now. He focused on building a shared vision.
Which involved?
Dealing with resistance, definitely. Encouraging teamwork, stimulating new ideas among staff, even changing how the school was structured to support this. He knew that to work well with parents and outside agencies, he first had to get his own team aligned, aiming for the same targets. It was cultural change.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Implementing that kind of blueprint, it's not just about ticking boxes on a framework. It demands a huge shift in mindset, moving away from what the sources call deficit thinking.
Yes, exactly. And the sources break down the barriers into about 6 categories. The paradigm shift needed is, well, it's fundamental.
Let's tackle the big one first. Attitudinal barriers. What's the shift there?
It's moving away from seeing diversity as just a problem, or only seeing a student through the lens of their diagnosis or label, or seeing difference as an opportunity, actually. Focusing on supporting learners based on their strengths, their interests. What can they do? What excites them? It requires real self-reflection from everyone in the school.
And if the attitude shifts, the curriculum has to shift too. Which brings us to curricular barriers. What's the main challenge there, structurally, perhaps?
The biggest hurdle is letting go of that rigid, one-size-fits-all curriculum, where students just have to cope. The shift is towards responsive teaching, flexible differentiation. But the key structural change, it's making the class teacher truly central in supporting all learners, but within a team,
As opposed to.
as opposed to the old model of relying on specialists to sort of take difficult students off the class teacher's hands. In an inclusive system, the class teacher owns the learning for everyone in their room, with specialists providing support to the teacher and student within that context. That's a big role change.
Definitely. And then there are the physical aspects, physical and environmental barriers. You mentioned UDL earlier. For listeners maybe not familiar, what is Universal Design for Learning in simple terms?
UDL is basically a set of principles for curriculum development that give all individuals equal opportunities to learn. It's about designing learning experiences, materials, environments to be usable by everyone right from the start.
From the point of design, not bolted on later.
Exactly. Not as an afterthought or adaptation.
That sounds like it could be expensive, especially in older school buildings. What's a realistic first step for a school using UDL principles? Maybe a low-cost one.
That's a fair point. Major renovations are costly. But UDL is also a mindset. Think about sensory things. Instead of a loud, jarring school bell between classes.
Which can be awful for some kids.
Right. UDL might suggest using, say, 30 seconds of soft background music as a transition cue. That's a policy change, not concrete. Or offering multiple ways for students to show what they know, maybe a presentation, instead of just a written test. That's UDL too.
And simpler things.
Simple things like making sure signage is large, clear, high contrast, having some adjustable desks available. It's about flexibility and removing barriers wherever you find them.
So tackling these barriers requires schools to constantly look inward, to self-evaluate.
Absolutely. You can't improve what you don't acknowledge is a problem. Using tools like the Index for Inclusion framework can help. It forces schools to regularly assess themselves against clear standards and keep that transformation moving. It has to be continuous.
Okay, let's bring this down to the classroom level. We know diversity is broad. Teachers need practical tools. Let's talk about culturally relevant pedagogy, CRP. The sources point out there are actually 4 related terms here. Bit nuanced.
Yeah, this is important for teachers because we sometimes throw these terms around interchangeably, but they represent different levels, really. The baseline is culturally sensitive.
Which is
Just being aware that cultural differences exist, knowing about different holidays, maybe dietary needs, that sort of thing, basic awareness.
Okay. Then you have culturally relevant teaching from Gloria Ladson Billings. How's that a step up?
Relevant means you're actively using students' backgrounds, their heritage, their community experiences as teaching resources. The teacher acts like a cultural translator, connecting the student's world to the school curriculum.
Got an example?
Sure, teaching geometry. Instead of just abstract shapes, maybe you use examples from patterns in local architecture or traditional crafts familiar to the students.
Makes sense. And culturally responsive sounds broader.
It is broader. Responsive is more systemic. The whole school is adapting to the students. Students are seen as assets, bringing knowledge with them. The teachers constantly tweaking how they teach based on the specific students in front of them, their learning styles, communication norms.
In the top tier, the ultimate goal.
That would be culturally sustaining pedagogy. This goes beyond just responding. It actively works to honor, explore, and even extend students' cultural heritage. It sees young people as producers of culture.
Producers of culture, how does that work in practice, say, in a history class?
Okay, so a culturally sustaining history teacher wouldn't just teach the standard textbook narrative. They might have students research local community histories, maybe oral histories from elders, analyzing how those narratives compare to the official version. They might create projects, documentaries, articles, presentations that add these local, diverse perspectives back into the broader understanding of history. They are producing a richer cultural understanding.
And the research shows that using these higher levels, relevant, responsive, sustaining, really does boost engagement in learning.
Yes, particularly for students from marginalized backgrounds. It validates who they are. It makes learning feel relevant and meaningful to them.
Right. Let's pivot to some very actionable strategies now, starting with something internal for the educator. Self-awareness. We have to talk about implicit bias.
Critical topic. These are the automatic, often unconscious preferences we might have. They can subtly shape everything how we interact with students, who we call on, how we grade,
I mean,
discipline,
the impact can be significant.
hugely. So the first step is making the implicit explicit. Educators need to engage in self-assessment, maybe taking something like an implicit association test, an IAT, just to become aware of potential biases they hold.
Awareness first. Then what? What concrete steps can teachers take in things like grading to ensure fairness?
Standardization is key here, making the student's background irrelevant to the mark. Things like blind grading, removing names, or any identifiers from assignments before marking,
Practical.
and coupling that with really clear, transparent rubrics shared with students beforehand, outlining exactly what success looks like. That transparency helps everyone.
Blind grading sounds great for essays, maybe less so for projects or in smaller classes where you know the students' work. Any other tactics?
Yes, something simpler perhaps is structured exposure,
Exposure.
showing students images, biographies, examples of diverse people succeeding in the field they're studying. So, female engineers, scientists of color, writers from different backgrounds. Research suggests this can actually lessen bias, at least short term, for both students and teachers. It normalizes diversity within excellence.
Okay, final area. Assessment itself. If teaching needs to be culturally responsive, assessment does too. It can't just be about regurgitating facts.
Exactly. Assessment needs to be flexible. It should allow students to use their own experiences, their cultural fluencies, as you said earlier.
Like how?
Well, instead of analyzing, say, a Renaissance painting known only in the Western canon, maybe an art or social studies task, ask students to evaluate the historical context of art forms from their own cultural backgrounds. It values their knowledge base.
And maybe changing the format of assessment too.
Absolutely. If you have students from cultures where group work and discussion are highly valued learning modes,
Collectivist cultures, right?
yes. They maybe assessment includes group presentations, debates, Socratic seminars, not just individual timed essays. The idea is offering choice in how students demonstrate mastery while holding them all to the same high standard using that clear rubric we talked about.
So, wrapping this all up, what's the main takeaway for someone listening today? It feels like achieving real inclusion is, well, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's a good way to put it. It's definitely not about finding one magic program or just throwing more money at the same old system.
It's about,
It's about a continuous, deep transformation,
Mm.
changing the actual design of education, the culture within schools, the underlying values, and that needs that strategic leadership. It needs teachers equipped with different pedagogical tools, and it needs constant, honest self-reflection about things like bias. It's adapting the whole environment to the learners within it.
a total system change. Okay, and the final thought you want to leave us chewing on.
Well, the research consistently points to a significant return on investment for inclusive education. Not just better social outcomes, like more empathy or less bullying, though those are huge, but actual economic benefits too, increased participation in the workforce later on.
Interesting.
So if we accept that inclusive teaching is quality teaching, then maybe the real measure of any education system isn't how well it sorts and separates students, but how effectively it designs itself to actually thrive on the diversity it inevitably contains.